Hello there, and thanks for joining us on this fresh episode of Africa Business Weekly, bringing you highlights of some of the continent's biggest conversations in the world of business. I'm Akio Bakeye. Now, our spotlight this week starts from West Africa as we explore the region's position in the global venture capital market. For East Africa, we take on fluid development and the impact of the conflict in Sudan. Well, it's time for our first crossing with Palesa. She's on standby to give us some insight from Southern Africa and discussions that shaped this week. Take it over, Palesa.
The IMF sees growth in sub-Saharan Africa decelerating to 2.6% this year and also forecasts a funding squeeze to hit debt-stricken countries amidst higher borrowing costs and inflation. For more, my colleague Fifi Peters caught up with Totanga Rusike, economist at the Bank of America, Sub-Saharan Africa. Let's listen in.
We are broadly aligned in terms of the views around the need for fiscal consolidation and, more importantly, around the big funding squeeze, which is essentially the big takeaway from the IMF meetings, that our countries, especially in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa in particular, that there is a shortage of financing. Things have changed quite remarkably compared to pre-pandemic, that there were many sources of financing that were coming pre-pandemic. These are no longer coming. You can talk about three main sources, being the official lending from the likes of the IMF World Bank, the second one also being China for bilateral lenders. Then you can also talk about the market, which is through the issuance of Eurobonds, as well as another source. So financing conditions have changed. There's quite a lot of interest rate hikes over the last 12 months, which have made it difficult for countries to actually access the markets. So many countries are facing the big funding squeeze, I think, as a starting point.
Yeah, and so pretty bleak picture. And the question becomes around the way forward. I mean, you do cite all the avenues that traditionally fund or traditionally provided financing as being quite limited resources right now. So what options then do some of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa have? I think the latest forecast from the World Bank citing some 60% or so of countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are debt-stricken, that are in debt distress, rather, to be more specific. So for those ones specifically, what options do they have?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the majority of countries are in high risk of debt distress. We already have, let's say, Ghana and Zambia, who have defaulted in the last 2 years or so, that are looking to restructure their debt. So there is a process taking place under the common framework for debt treatment in order to renegotiate debt for these countries. So I think what that process has done is to classify creditors into official creditors and then private creditors. So we seem to be having slow steps or hitting some snags on the part of official creditors for the process to move forward. So there were quite a number of discussions, I think particularly that relate to Zambia and Ghana for official creditors to move forward, particularly with China having joined the official creditors and trying to get agreements moving. So I think in Ghana's case, what we have now is possibly potential developments around official creditors agreeing to provide the required financing assurances that would allow Ghana to proceed with IMF board consideration or hopefully board approval by the end of the first half or at least end of June. So that would show some progress. On the other hand, I think we also have Zambia, who are already in an IMF program trying to do the right adjustments, but the delays have come through on the negotiation side. So there is a process, at least from official creditors too, to try and get a memorandum of understanding that says we are negotiating in good faith that can help for IMF to actually disperse the disbursement that they'd held up for the program to actually proceed.
The World Health Organization, in collaboration with other partners, recently launched their first Africa vaccine hub in Cape Town. By 2024, the aim is to have 60% of Africa's vaccine needs sourced locally. We spoke to Claudia Nane, Management and Coordination Lead at the World Health Organization, for more.
Afrigen is part of a consortium that the South African government has set up to develop and transfer mRNA technology to other technology recipients around the world. Indeed, Afrigen has already developed the technology at a laboratory scale and is ready to start transferring it across the globe. We have 15 recipient manufacturers that are waiting for this technology to be available. The plan, Tanya, is to proceed with the development of this technology to arrive to a COVID-19 vaccine in the coming years and a manufacturing capacity of around 45 million doses. However, this technology is already now developed, and so we urged South Africa to start sharing it so that they could, other manufacturers around the world in low and middle income countries could start researching potential alternative uses to COVID vaccines for this technology. So indeed, between Afrigen and BioVac, that is a local vaccine manufacturer, another one here in Cape Town, the South African government is investing together with partners from around the world in this cutting-edge technology and indeed filling the gap we saw during the COVID response in terms of availability of vaccine manufacturing capacity in low and middle-income countries.
Now, when we talk of 45 million doses, to what extent is this narrowing the gap between developed and developing economies when it comes to vaccine production?
We are still far from the global needs in terms of vaccines. However, the African Union has set itself a clear target. By 2040, the 60% of the global African needs for vaccines should be sourced locally on the continent. So it's a very good step towards that direction, and they have the full support of obviously WHO, but also the international community and several donors that have stepped in the mRNA technology transfer program. mRNA is one of the technology available so far. It has promising targets. However, it's still to be studied. We have only one vaccine, that is the COVID vaccine, that has been approved internationally by all national regulatory authorities, and that's been used for using this technology. So research and development of alternative vaccines on the same technology is going on, and it's promising.
That's it from the Southern Africa team. It's back to you.
Thanks for the update there, Palesa. Up next is some content from the east of the continent with Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
Well, thank you, Akin. Africa is well poised to become a key player in the global economy, but the continent must focus on driving investments in the resources sector, which are tourism and healthcare. CNBC Africa had a chat with Bhavesh Chandaria for more.
It's largely on the tacit, intangible human potential. Throughout the world, the best of companies with adequate resources are grappling to fully harness this resource. And Africa also is not harnessing half of what it should have been.
Why have companies been unable to fully exploit locally available resources and talents across Africa?
Africa has inherent many structural, many historical, and many know-how related constraints to be able to realize the resources that we have. We are supply chain for the world for the raw material. Unfortunately, because of lack of governance or lack of defensive and protective mechanism for Africa, we are vulnerable to exploitation. But today, I don't want to focus only on the raw material tangible resources and its tapping by Africa. I'm also looking at the human potential. Human potential among the four factors of production: capital, land, labor, and machines. Human potential is the only one factor, that is labor and human potential, which decides whether it wants to deliver or not. Unlike the other, a machine has a rated output, and a machine delivers that rated output plus minus tolerance of deviation. But human potential may probably not. It's both cause and an effect. The onus is on employers to do the right things, to be able to tap into the discretionary effort that human potential has and that it can deliver. And that know-how is not available. There's no playbook templated for that. And we are just grappling with that. In this VUCA world, distracted by social media and the trends like quiet quitting, onus is on employers, big scale, large scale, organized corporate with the budgets or small scale, to make the first and the last move to tap into the human potential, which we're not doing enough.
Quite interesting insights there, Bhavesh. And which opportunities currently exist for small companies to scale?
I think Africa need not climb the small steps and reach the top of evolution. We have the benefit of the late entrant. Africa needs to leapfrog directly into the next gen industry. According to me, the industries that offer tremendous potential to Africa and they're fit to context, number one is renewables. I worked 6 years in renewables, and during my time last decade, when I was working, unfortunately, the place of electricity generation and the place of consumption required a grid, and grid is a massive investment in terms of time and cost. Today, technology is available to make at least 1/3 of Africa's electricity requirement off-grid. And I think Africa should seize this opportunity and develop the whole ecosystem of generating off-grid solar technology. And Africa should lead this. Also, in terms of storage, Africa has the raw materials for batteries and all. It should lead the world in manufacturing the whole gamut of off-grid renewable system. And that would also immune us from the dependencies of our energy supplies from the rest of the world. So the first is renewables. Second is the best thing about Africa. Let's play to our strength is our people. Happy, nice, closer to nature, amiable, malleable. So let's play to our strengths. We need to harness the human potential of Africa with the natural beauty of Africa in terms of two industries that I would like to propose, where even small scale and the large scale industries can come in. One is health. Africa should become the healthcare giver of the whole world. And also in terms of today, we are dependent on most of the medicine production and most of the equipment production from the supplied from the outside of the world. We need to focus there. Hospitality, what we're doing is very little, and we need to go very, very transformationally. We need to augment our supply of hospitality and tourism. Look at what Rwanda does. Rwanda has got to visit Rwanda on Arsenal jerseys, a 30 million contract with Gunners. Why can't the rest of the Africas be as proactive in taking such bold steps and getting more of tourism coming into? So these are the three sectors I believe are waiting for us to conquer them.
Despite a ceasefire declaration by the warring factions, the conflict in Sudan isn't hinting at closure anytime soon, as noted by an envoy earlier this week. My colleague Eugene Anangwe was joined by two experts on the subject to delve deep into the issues and the role of external parties in helping resolve the issue and bring peace.
Those people following Sudan closely were particularly surprised that there was a breakdown in the process for moving towards a civilian government. That was always controversial, and it was always questionable whether the two generals of one of the Rapid Support Forces and the other of the Sudan Armed Forces were really sincere about moving to a civilian government. Mm-hmm. So that was not a surprise. I think what was a surprise is that it so quickly developed into massive fighting between two large, well-armed military components in Sudan, and particularly in the capital of Khartoum. That has never happened before, and that caught everyone by surprise, mm-hmm. particularly the degree of the magnitude of the fighting that has been occurring. But the actual breakdown of the process was not especially surprising.
And I want to hear from you, Khalid. I mean, you've also been following closely on these particular matters. There are those who actually feel that we've done so poorly in preventing crisis, especially where probably there's a possibility of averting the damages that this crisis end up, causing. What is surprising for you in this whole scenario that is actually unfolding in our eyes in Sudan today?
Well, I think the singular surprise is that this kind of violence would occur in the capital city. As the ambassador said, I completely agree. But for Sudanese in Sudan, in the 2 weeks prior to this, there wasn't very much of a surprise. I was out of Sudan, but my Sudanese friends and colleagues in Khartoum saw the deployment and mobilization, the increasing mobilization of the Rapid Support Forces, Hemeti's militias. And so they definitely saw that coming. I just was speaking to some Sudanese in Khartoum just yesterday, and they told me that they saw that. So in terms of many people on the ground, they were not surprised. The rest of us, as the ambassador correctly said, were surprised about the severity of the violence in Khartoum and its timing. But it's really important to understand that no one was surprised by the fact that there would be a potential breakdown of the framework agreement, because the most central contentious issues of the framework agreement, including security sector reform, which is so crucial, transitional justice, issues of economic policy, issues of accountability, those were deferred until a later phase 2. So organizations, both Sudanese analysts and organizations like the International Crisis Group, had warned that there was too little participation in terms of civilian society stakeholders. I myself had warned, frankly, about the issue of the quick timing, not giving enough time to work and iron out those issues. The international community accelerated this kind of process. And so the breakdown, unfortunately, of the framework agreement was absolutely not a surprise. It was absolutely coming. No one could predict, however, this kind of unprecedented violence in the capital city.
Yeah, I want to bring in Ambassador Shane again. I mean, let's look at the role of the international community on this, particularly in either escalating or de-escalating, particularly in demystifying the myths from the facts. I'll give you a chronology of events in Sudan. February 12th, Sudan confirms deal for Russian naval base. On February 16, President Biden sends $288 million in humanitarian aid to Sudan. Later on, in March 9th, Victoria Nuland visits Sudan to discuss democracy. And then on April, chaos erupt in Sudan. There are those who've been looking at conspiracy theories in the role of the international community in this. Is this a proxy war? Is someone actually having their hand in this? And who?
I'm not sure I would describe this as a proxy war. I think it is more a question of two generals who very much desire to hold power and who have strong, well-armed armies behind them, deciding that they will proceed at any cost to retain power. It is purely and simply a power struggle.
Well, that's all we have in East Africa this week. It's back to you.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Now let's come over to the west of the continent. Now we start off with stories from the African Private Capital Association, which says Africa remained one of the fastest growing venture capital markets globally in 2022, raising about $6.5 billion in 853 deals, including $1.3 billion of venture debts, despite several shocks. Nadia Kouassi Koulibaly, the head of research at AVCA, shared some insights on likely patterns that will shape 2023 performance across board.
So I would say that, yes, as you mentioned, so venture capital deal making in 2022, so industry maintained a decade-long continuous annual growth with the figures that you already mentioned. So this set 2022 as an industry record for the VC in Africa by deal volume. And this growth is remarkable when comparing with the global context, which experienced significant contraction in venture capital deal activity in various regions, so North Africa, Asia, and Latin America, the latest having seen the largest decrease over the year. So from a deal value perspective, also 2022 start is strong in Africa with the strongest half-year activity on the continent to date. The macroeconomic turbulence, which shook the global venture market, finally caught up to Africa in the second half of the year. So, but however, unlike the 32% of decrease in global venture capital, so Africa venture ecosystem was relatively stable in 2022 with only a slight decrease of 1% in the total amount raised by African startup comparing to 2021. So I would say that overall, while far from unaffected, Africa remained one of the fastest growing VC markets globally in 2022.
The report states that younger companies in Africa attracted the majority of venture funding across the continent. Talk to us about the sectors. What's the appeal, the continued appeal, for young companies? What's the edge?
Yes, so we've seen, as let's say, as a usual trend, financial, information technology, and also consumer discretionary, that were the most free active sectors by volume for the third year running in 2022. So the dominance of these free sectors reflects normally Africa's evolving demography and the changing nature of African consumption propensity. So not only are African entrepreneurs bringing new goods and services to the market, but also the innovative use of technology is also modernizing the distribution and accessibility of these entities beyond the upper, let's say, middle class to Africa growing cohort of young, urban, and connected workforce. Also, given that Africa economic growth prospects are linked to this accelerating urbanization, growing middle class with more discretionary incomes and improvement in digital infrastructure, deepening both internet and mobile penetration across the continent. Also, of these free sectors among investors is likely to persist in the long term. What was also very interesting is the notable rising within the venture capital landscape of industrial. So what did we see behind the industrial sectors? These sectors increasing preeminence is due to a surge of deals in the transportation and commercial of professional service industries. More specifically, within the transportation, we've seen more mobility.
Up next, CNBC Africa's Kenneth Igbomo caught up with the new group CEO of EcoBank, Jeremy Awori, on the sidelines of his first meeting with Nigeria's capital market community. He's optimistic that despite global challenges, Africa presents promising prospects for investment while sharing some outlook for the group. Take a listen.
I'm very excited, obviously, to be joining EcoBank Group as Group CEO. And I think really the future is very exciting. We're a business that is got banking, full banking operations in 33 markets, and we have operations in another 6. Nigeria is a core market for us. And we're really investing significantly in this business. And we're very excited about all the opportunities we have to work within those markets to grow our business.
Yeah, because talking about opportunities, the financial service space is rapidly evolving. And I'd like to speak to how EcoBank is positioning itself in that space. I hear there's some huge work coming in terms of fintechs for you.
Yeah, we see a lot of opportunities, and I think one of our responsibilities as well as business opportunities is helping businesses actually grow, and I think fintechs is a really exciting opportunity. We've seen a number of fintechs grow here in the Nigerian market, you know them, and we really want to work with them and leverage our network, because if you think about the power of being in 33 markets, we can actually plug in fintechs and use our rails to make payments across these markets very quickly. So it really encourages trade under Africa, continental free trade. It encourages the movement of people. It supports remittances, and it supports the growth of our consumer and SME business.
Yeah, but we're also in a time where there are quite a lot of headwinds in the banking space. We've seen what happened in the US in the banking space there. And I'm trying to think about, as a regional bank, looking at the continent here, quite a lot of opportunities, like you said, with the AFCFTA. And I'd like to know how you're positioning as well in that regard and turning those headwinds into opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, we're a bank here with a long history, and our commitment to Africa is second to none. We've got great relationships across the continent. We work with leaders and governments across the continent, like I said. So we're really trying to move and promote African trade. And I think if there's one lesson we've seen is the outflow of capital in difficult situations like this. And I think this is when Africans need to come together and trade amongst each other. We've got rails and platforms that allow us to encourage trade across borders and to make instant payments in our local currencies. So I think that's a very positive thing. And we see huge opportunity for penetration of financial services amongst consumers and encouraging use of digital banking, to take banking even into SMEs and support them to grow in the future alongside our big corporates that we support in our corporate bank.
Let's talk about the performance of the other markets that you are in right now. You mentioned Nigeria, a very key part of that strategy going forward, and I'd like you to speak to the performance that we're seeing here and more or less how you're looking to unlock that next level of growth for EcoBank.
Yeah, for us, we're in 4 real markets. Nigeria is one, and then we have Francophone West Africa. Then we have what we call Central, Eastern and Southern Africa, CESA. And then we have the Ghanaian Anglophone West Africa. So we've got a good balance across that. For us, Nigeria is very important. We look at it and say, you know, you've got over 200 million people, the biggest economy in the continent, and we want to unlock a lot more growth in our business. We'll be expanding in our business, as I say, in the consumer front, in the SME front, alongside corporate banking, and we see an opportunity in payments also. So we'll be broadening our product set, we'll be bringing in more digital solutions that work for our customers, and we want to work with partners who are really as committed and want to see the growth of our business, and more importantly, the people and the countries across Africa.
Well, that's it from West Africa, and a wrap for this month's broadcast of Africa Business Weekly. A happy May Day as well to all workers ahead of Monday's celebrations. Thank you, Palace and Sarah, for the regional updates. Join us same time next week for even bigger conversations. I'm Akin Obakeye. Thanks for watching.